Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to take place in the second chapter in the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews offers, among other things, a highly sophisticated Christology. The author establishes the tome in the first three chapters, establishing the Messiah's supremacy and superiority over prophets, angels, and Moses, respectively, although much of the angels, we'll just read the first four verses. It's a single sentence. Yahweh, having of old spoken in many portions in many ways to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by the Son, whom he has appointed heir of all, through whom also he made the ages, who being the brightness of the esteem of the exact representation of his substance, and sustaining all by the word of his power, having made a cleansing of our sin through himself, sat down at the right hand of the greatness on high, having become so much better than the angels, as he has inherited a more excellent name than them. He opens with the fact of revelation. God speaks in various dispensations through various ways. He spoke through dreams, visions, prophecies, and he speaks through creation, natural revelation. But the prophecies, he was the fulfillment of the prophet. He was a prophet and more than a prophet. He was more than a prophet. He was the fulfillment of the prophecy. He was the fullest, final, and most complete, fullest form of revelation of the Father to humanity. He was him in the flesh. The word incarnate, so as such he exists as a revelation to point us to who God is and what he is like and what he wants us to do, and the duality of his creative and redemptive prowess. He is master over creation and redemption, is indicated by the fact that is sustaining all by the word of his power. So the act of creation demands maintenance of it. It's not enough to bring the spark. You have to hold it all together. So he does that with the word of his power. And cleansing of our sin through himself, he paid our penalty so that we could be righteous, blameless, and sinless as we are presented in the judgment, because he endured the sin penalty that he did not deserve for our sakes and on our behalves. And because he did, he is exalted. He is at the right hand of the Father, and it is his superiority over the angels is self-evident by the exalted position that he occupies in proximity to the. So his name and his power and his respect and his honor is exceedingly beyond them, and the practice of angel worship was somewhat dangerous in the first century Italian peninsula amongst the Jews. So the author is also setting about to clarify the confusion that angels are servants and mediaries, and he says so much in the 14th verse that they are messengers and intermediaries. They exist between divinity and humanity, but in between that, he quotes a variety of Old Testament passages, especially from the book of Psalms, Psalm 2:7. He says, "To what angel have you ever said, you are my son today, I've brought you today," and then and I shall be to him a father and shall be to him a son. 2 Samuel 7:14, that's the covenantal promise of David. Then he says Deuteronomy 32:43, that the angels owe their reverence to Yahweh because he is greater, he made them, and as the son he is equal to the Father, and as such the angels owe their reverence to him too. And he didn't say to any angel what he said in Psalm 104:14 or Psalm 45:6-7. You loved righteousness and hated lawlessness, somewhat similar to, but not quite exactly, to Psalm 97:10. But because of this, Yahweh your Elohim has appointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions. So his supremacy is more. It is more than his companions, more than his rival claimants, more than his other servants. His superiority over Moses is established in such a way as the builder of the house. And he is the builder of the house, and Moses is the servant, and he is the son of the house. But then he quotes Psalm 102:25-27. Just they shall perish, but you remain, and they shall all grow old like a garment. So he is eternally alive, eternally young, and eternally unending. So all that we can observe in the observable universe is designed to decay and perish and corrupt and vanish, and it is a transitory reminder of his eternality. And then he quotes Psalm 110:1. This might be one of 25 citations of the famous messianic psalm in the New Testament. Which of the angels did he ever say, "Sit on my right throne until I make your enemies a footstool for your feet"? That was David's psalm, and it is interpreted a messianic, an allusion to it is messianic in tone. And then verse 14 just lets the record straight about who angels are and what they do. Are they not all serving spirits set out to attend to those who are about to inherit salvation? So they are at heaven's beck and call. Yahweh has an attention and an affection on the saints and the saved and the elect, and he sends angels to minister on their behalf. They translate literally as messengers. So they are as such conduit and intermediaries between humanity and divinity. They bestow upon us divine grace when we need it, as we need it. On our walk out there. Second chapter, first verse, lesson itself. Because of this, we have to pay more attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away. This is the first of 5 strategically placed warnings against apostasy. The potentiality to know the truth and forsake the truth invites greater consequences than one who dies in their sins ignorantly. So the incentive is there. We have to pay attention. We cannot treat this trivially. We cannot scoff at this. A scoffer is one who treats trivially that which deserves and demands to be treated significantly. This is our salvation. This is serious. We got to, pay more attention, not neglect it, not forsake it, not drift away. Now that image is likened to a ship at sea that is not securely anchored. In this imagery of the anchor forms in 6:19 the anchor of our hope. For if the word spoken through angels proved to be firm, and every transgression and disobedience received a right word. He's talking about the law according to Jewish traditionalism. And there was angelic mediaries in the passage. This much is reflected by Stephen's sermon in Acts 7. He says that you have received the law from angels, but you have not obeyed it. Paul says, he points to an angelic origin of the law in Galatians. So this was in currency, even though there is no explicit message of the angels at Sinai, whereas there is in the theophany in the burning bush to Moses. There is quite clearly indicated in Exodus 3:2 an angel. But for that sake, we just want to know that what he's talking about, the word, is the law. And there is a greater dispensation, a greater covenant, and a greater revelation. So in light of the consequences for abusing and mistreating and deviating from the inferior covenant, how much more greatly so inviting of the consequences are we if we treat trivially the superior covenant. How shall we escape if we neglect so great a deliverance, which first began to be spoken by the Master, and was confirmed to us by those that heard? So notice what he says. He says neglect. He doesn't say reject. So all we have to do is be lazy and inattentive and indifferent and apathetic to our salvation. That's how it starts. And then eventually we reject it and we forsake it. So we want to nip it in the bud. If we find ourselves getting lax or falling asleep on our salvation, we need to the incentive to escape is there to remind us that we can escape the judgment, but we can only do it in as much as we do not neglect so great a salvation. So great a salvation demands that it be heeded to and honored to the letter, and not neglected, rejected, or anything else. But this message comes from the Master himself, the namesake of our religion. This is his message, his good news, and the message is that he died for our sins, and through his atonement we can be saved in eternity with eternal life in heaven forever with him. And this was confirmed to us by those that heard. The Messiah was a historical figure, and he had walked the earth not too distant from the writing of this. So there were some in the audience who would have had living personal interactions with them, and their testimony has become our testimony. This is what we inherit from them from 2,000 years. Elohim also bearing witness both with signs and wonders, and with various miracles and gifts of the Ruach Kadesh distributed according to his own desire. Another form of the witness that he sent to confirm the veracity of his message was that the messengers were endowed with miraculous potentials. They healed people wherever they went. They lifted up the blind beggar, the apostles did in the temple in Acts 3, the beggar who was lame from birth. They lifted him up, and by the time he got up, the feet. But that was just one of the many miracles. And their calling, their commission is not our own. We are not called to wield miracles, although there are saints in every generation who do have the gift of healing and the gift of miracles, but they are rare and few and far between. Our commission is to spread the message of the good word, and one of the ways we do that is that we are given gifts. The Ruach Kodesh is the author and origin. All the spiritual gifts emanate from the Spirit. So he distributes it. Each person has at least one, and it is your duty to identify, cultivate, develop, and utilize the gift that he gives you. They are to his sovereign selection. This much is communicated in 1 Corinthians 12, the 4th through 11th verses. We can read of the Spirit's sovereign selection of the spiritual gifts that he distributes. So my gift is teaching, and that's one of the things that I like to do. This is me and my element. I was given the gift of teaching, so that's one of the ways I like to give it back. I want to tell you, your gift may not be teaching, but you do have a spiritual gift. It may be preaching, it may be prophesying, it may be helping, it may be helping is one of the overlooked ones, but there's no shame in having the gift of being a charitable person and helping and all that stuff. For it is not to angels that he has subjected the world to come, concerning which we are to speak. So the angels, they are greater than us. They are superior in strength and spirituality than us. But, it is our dominion. The world to come belongs to us. The angels are almost our servants, even though they are superior to us. But this is the world to come of which he speaks. He's talking about salvation, our eschatological expectation, the world beyond this world. The world that we now see is not the world of which he speaks. He speaks of the world to come. This is a future expectation, and it happens after we die, and is made possible through the atonement, our ability to live everlasting in the world to come, or to live at all. And once we are there, we live forever. But somewhere one has witnessed, saying, "What is man that you remember him, or the Son of Man that you look after him?" This someone is David in the 8th Psalm, when he speaks of the diminutiveness of man and just how special he feels that we are the crown glory of his creation. We who are a speck of dust on the earth are so significant beyond our size. So in the entire galaxies, all his attention, most of his attention and most of his affection is on man. Who are we to merit this love, this grace? We are nothing special in ourselves. Nevertheless, in spite of ourselves, he looks after us. He has a concern. He has a plan. He has a purpose for us. And even though we deserve it not, even though we are unworthy of him, he deems us worthy to partake and share in salvation. You have made him a little lower than the angels. You have crowned him with esteem and respect, and put him over the works of your hands. David is talking about man. We are inferior in attributes and certainly strength to angels. They are stronger creatures than us. But we are given dominion of the earth, and we are charged to steward the world and its resources and manage it and distribute the resources accordingly and godly. So that is our task. But what the author of Hebrews is talking about is the Messiah. He was made a little lower than the angels. He who was divine, he who was in the beginning, from the beginning, and before the beginning, was made a little in the incarnation, was made inferior to angels in the flesh, in the frame, and one of the consequences of his incarnation was the sacrifice of the full infinitude of his divine attributes. For instance, he was not omniscient. He did not know the hour of his return, Matthew 24:36, but he was certainly wise beyond measure. He was not omnipotent. He could not, he could move mountains with faith, certainly, but he was not in his frame. He did experience all the infirmities of the flesh, and because he resisted and overcame temptation, he is qualified to be our high priest, a theme and concept which is unique to the account of Hebrews, and as such it is an indispensable addition to the collected canon. We first read of that in the 17th verse, the word, that the concept is developed more fully in the subsequent chapters. You have put all in subjection under his feet, for in that he put all in subjection under him. He left naught that is subjected to him. But now we do not see all subjected to him. So everything that we see, every life form on Earth, we are superior to it. We dominate it. That is part of our. But the closed quote comes putting in subjection all under our feet, and then the author of Hebrews adds commentary to the psalm, which is quoted Psalm 8 verses 4 through 6, and then his commentary is for, and then he's all put on subjection under him. He left not that was not subjected under him, and now do we see all that is subjected to him. So there is so much, everything we see belongs to him, the visible world and the invisible world, Colossians 1:17. There's so much we don't see that is subjected to him. His sovereignty is omnipresent. It extends across the physical world, the world of matter, the world of the temporal world, the world of physics, and it also extends across the immaterial, the spiritual, and the invisible world. So even though we are gods in the sense that we are delegated to steward what rightfully belongs to him, his sovereign jurisdiction is so all-encompassing as to leave no item in the visible or the visible world unchecked. But we do see him who was made a little while lower than the angels, Yahshua, because of the suffering of death, crowned with esteem and respect, that by the grace of Elohim he should taste death for everyone. The author of Hebrews may or may not, we don't know who he is, first of all, but he may or may not have been an eyewitness to the one of whom he speaks, the one who was made a little lower than angels, the Word who became flesh, pitched his tent among men, and spoke his message at the age of 30 through 33, and really turned the world upside down. And his death is what gives meaning to his entire ministry. So much is made possible, so much explosions of openings and opportunities happen because of his suffering and death. And the paradox is that through his degradation, his humility, we are exalted and we are esteemed to somewhere that respect. This is wholly an act of grace, start to finish, for him to endure the hatred and hostility of sinful, violent men, to really pay the sin penalty that was inflicted upon him by sinners, and to forgive all the sins past, present, and future. But he tasted death for everyone, hopefully, so it's not necessary that we may die what the book of Revelation calls the second death, the eternal death, the death of the spirit, the death of life as we can have it. For it was fitting for him, because of all whom all are, and through whom all are, in bringing many sons to esteem, to make him the princely leader of their deliverance, perfect through sufferings. That word princely leader appears about 4 times in the New Testament, the Greek term. Also the author of our salvation. Here it just speaks. He is the pioneer. He is the avant-garde. He is at the front and center. He is at command and control, and he's leading the troops as a prince in battle through salvation, and he did it through his suffering. And this was this was the only way that would have been possible for us to be adopted in the fullest sense in the heavenly homeland, was because of the suffering that that our princely leader of salvation paid voluntarily, willingly, and uncomplainingly. For both he who makes sacred and those who are being made sacred are all of one, for which reason he is not ashamed to call them his brothers. There is an equality that he is just superior enough to bring about. He can give us his righteousness. It is imputed to us, not imparted to us. There is a difference, but he makes us sacred. We are not sacred. We are not righteous. We are not good. Any human being who claims to be good has not read the Bible that says none are good. Psalm 14:1 and 53:1. So good is the sacred term that we are called to cultivate, exists perfectly, thoroughly, and totally in divinity, but he can make us sacred through the process of sanctification, and through that we are exalted and uplifted to an equality of brotherhoods. He makes us his brothers. A friend is born for adversity, but a brother is closer than a friend. Proverbs 17 somewhere, saying, I shall announce your name to my brothers in the midst of the congregation. I shall sing praise to you. This is a quotation of Psalm 22 too. This is just the irresistible evangelical impulse of David. Now, the 22nd Psalm is a psalm of suffering. It is also a messianic psalm. But when he's all delivered, when he's out of all his troubles, he's telling him he's going to sing his name so loud, so clear, so fully in public at the congregation. And because the Prince of our salvation paved the blood-soaked path to our salvation, we have it should be our impulse to be governed by this compulsion to announce his name publicly and sing praises to him publicly and just give witness and testimony for all that he has done in our lives and all that he can do in the lives of others and all that he has done in history, everything from creation and redemption, and it's just all too magnificent. And again, I shall put my trust in him. And again, see, I and the children whom Yahweh gave me. This is a quotation of Isaiah 8:17-18. But, if we put our trust in who do you put your trust in? Do you put your trust in your bank account? Do you put your trust in the nation, for your security? But we need to put our trust in Yahweh with all our hearts and lean not on our own understanding. The trust in the Hebrew original is just the trust of abject submission of a defeated warrior on battle, bowing in submission to a king. That is how we have to put our trust, and then we will belong to him. We will be part of the children whom we were given. Therefore, since the children share in flesh and blood, he himself similarly shared in the same, so that by means of his death he might destroy him, having the power of death, that is, the devil. It was necessary for him to embrace the humanity, to inhabit a frame of flesh, one that felt pain and infirmity. You put nails in the cross, and he'll feel it. He'll bleed. He'll scream, and he'll feel the full penalty of the punishment. So the flesh and blood, and because he spread that blood, he spilled it on our behalf when he endured our vicarious atonement. This was all necessary to defeat the devil. Now, the devil uses the threat of death, the fear of death, as an effective and potent weapon to spread discouragement, doubt, fear, confusion, and just dejectedness through God's creatures. But that potency has no power. It has no sway over those believers who can look at death and welcome it, knowing that we will be exalted and uplifted to heaven when we get there. And deliver those who throughout life were held in slavery by fear of death. The fear of death can cripple one's ability to live. It can cripple one's ability to enjoy life. Death comes to us all equally, and it makes us all equal when it comes, and is the one inescapable reality that we have to contend with. And we don't like to think about it. You mentioned death in conversations. People will turn on the conversations as if they had a remote control, switching the channel because they don't like it, they don't want to talk about it, they don't want to think about it. But it is something we need to think about and not fear, but look forward to eagerly and longingly, knowing the joy of salvation which awaits us. For doubtless he does not take hold of angels, but he takes hold the seed of Abraham. The seed of Abraham is the Jewish people and also the Christian people, according to Paul in Romans 4. He is the father of all those who believe. But, we, once more, the angels are superior to us and stronger than us and spiritually more significant than us, but we have privileges that they do not. We are taken hold of in ways that the angels are not. The angels exist to take hold of us in an intermediary capacity so that we can be taken hold of by him. So in every way he had to be made like his brothers in order to become a compassionate and trustworthy high priest in matters related to Yahweh, to make atonement for the sins of the people. He alone was uniquely constitutionally capable to bridge the chasm and the gap between lost humanity and divinity, because he was divine and he was fully human. He had both natures in perfect equilibrium. He was fully human in every sense and the form, and because of that he is able to procure our atonement. The atonement is lowercase here, but I often refer to the atonement, the new covenant atonement, the capital A one, the innocent Savior versus the innocent animal. Because the priest is also the sacrifice in the new covenant, the priest in the Old Testament offers the sacrifice, but in the New Testament, our high priest is the sacrifice, and he has the high priesthood, which is after the order of Melchizedek, who is a symbol of eternality by the author of Hebrews' clever mindset. He is without genealogy, but he explores and develops the theme of the high priest more fully in the subsequent pastors. It is a high priesthood after the order of Melchizedek, and as our high priest, he is able to sympathize with us in our sufferings, he says in the 14th through 16th verse of the 4th chapter. For in what he has suffered, he himself being tried, he is also able to help those who are tried. There isn't a trial or temptation that he did not go through, that he did not endure, that he did not resist, that he did not overcome. And because he overcame them all, he sympathizes, he empathizes with us, he enters into our temptations with us, and with his presence and in his company, the power and potency of temptation gradually disappears when we know that it can be resisted, it can be overcame, and it was in the one who is in us that overcame it. Hence, through his power, we are able to overcome temptation. Now, there is no temptation where he does not offer an escape route out of. 1 Corinthians 10:13. So it is necessary that we be tempted and tried, and it was necessary for him to be tempted and tried in order to maintain the sinlessness through which he can accomplish and procure our salvation. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.